Welcome to White Tech Study Part. Last class we had discussed. The last class we were discussing. Last class we were discussing what is that? What is that? How to register dispatches and container now. This is the internal flow. Last class we have discussed. One more time I'm revising. So my question is that last class question is my what is that? In Spring Boot MVC, XML configuration will not be okay. And also predefined special servlet class does not contain at the red web servlet annotations. Then how dispatcher servlet is registered with the servlet container during the at the time of deployment of web application. So now it internally happen, guys. Uh, servlet container search the these file in the library folder. It internally uses programmatic approach or dynamic registration you can call it by using sc.add servlet method to register dispatcher servlet with the to register dispatcher servlet with the servlet container having /URL pattern. Okay. So now this is the directory to search. Okay. So now these are the steps. These 9 number of steps. Two. Okay. Process to register dispatcher servlet dynamically with the servlet container. The steps. The steps is first programmer deploy Spring Boot MVC web application in where web server. Then the servlet container verifies the deployment directory structure. And servlet container verify the deployment directory structure. And after that, create the servlet context object. Servlet context object one per application. Okay. Servlet container searches. Servlet container search Java x.servlet container initializer. Okay, guys. Servlet container initializer file. This is the file. In this file, one class is there. One class is there. What is that? This class, Spring Servlet Container Initializer. In the file in all meta INF services folder. Okay, files that are added to one INF lib folder. These jars we added inside the web-inf/lib folder and finds the Spring Web.jar file. After that, after that getting this class name from the file, then load the class, create the object and object class, create object and calls the create object and calls the on startup method. What is that? On startup method having servlet context object as the argument value. Put that as the argument. So now on startup method searches for classes in the project implementing class. What is that? Project implementing class org.springframework.web application initializer interface and find the programmer supplied class. Pass this window, this interface, and after that it will find the programmer supplied class. This is the programmer supplied class, guys. Okay, supply is like this one class. To load the programmer supplied class and create the object and cause the on startup method having the select context object as the argument. Then superclass Spring Boot servlet initializer on startup method execute having logics. These many logics is having on startup method like create web application context container to create dispatcher servlet object with the servlet container. Okay, to register dispatcher servlet object with the servlet. This is the last class total, guys. So now today's session is session number is 6. So today's I'm going to discuss very important part about the Spring Boot MVC. Okay, what is that? Spring Boot MVC flow. Okay, Spring Boot MVC flow 06. very important class. Today is very. You can't imagine how much this is important. As the interview point of view, as the understanding Spring Boot MVC as well as okay. So give more concentration here. Today's is required, guys. Okay, so now topic is today's topic is Spring Boot MVC Pro. Spring Boot MVC Pro. Or as you can say, Spring MVC flow are same. Okay. In Spring MVC, I given very good flow of Spring MVC. Okay, Spring MVC. Those are miss the session. Please go and watch the first Spring MVC flow. Then you can understand this flow. Why? Because I will not use that much depthness in this flow. I have some reasons so not required. I have already taught you what is the reason, and again, I same thing I want to taught. I'm investing your time as well as my time, guys. So because my time is the very important, guys. I am taking a session as a free in a YouTube as well as live session. Okay, so that's why I'm taking a session as much as less time. Okay, so now here, observe this. Observe. You can see here. In Spring Boot MVC design behind us, designed around the dispatcher servlet line. Spring Boot MVC design based on what is that dispatcher servlet. So you can call with having front controller servlet component. You can say it. This is the front controller, and front controller you can also call dispatcher servlet. So Spring Boot MVC developed around the dispatcher servlet. If you give the request to the application, so dispatcher servlet take the request. If you want the response from your web application, then dispatcher servlet is responsible to give the response to you guys. So main work is due by the dispatcher servlet. Another thing, other component interact with the dispatcher servlet and dispatcher servlet give the response. Okay, you cannot interact with the direct handler method, handler classes and view resolver and databases also as well as. That's why it's follow. What is that Spring MVC? It's follow MVC design pattern. MVC not a design pattern. MVC architecture, guys. Okay, so now write it. So now point is Spring Boot MVC is designed. Spring Boot MVC is designed around dispatcher servlet. Dispatcher servlet component. Dispatcher servlet component which dispatcher servlet not a component which which is predefined, which is predefined, which is predefined front controller. You can also call this is the free control, like front controller servlet component. So now point is here. Point is all activities take place under the control or monitoring of dispatcher select component. Okay. Now write it. All the activities is like request giving, handler, processing, all these things. Huh? In Spring Boot MVC, you can also use Spring MVC. It's not an issue. Okay, Spring Boot MVC. Okay, Spring Boot MVC take place under the control or or monitoring of dispatcher servlet, monitoring of dispatcher servlet component. Okay. So now this is 2 points I want to show you. Spring related to Spring Boot MVC, guys. So now next is our actual flow. Now this one. Now here I want to give some note point. So that this is the important. You know, dispatcher servlet take the support of handler mapping component. This is the taking the support of handler mapping component and link the given request with handler method of the controller class. What is that? Now here. Now dispatcher servlet TS takes the support takes the support handler mapping, take the support of handler mapping component to map or you can say link okay, link the given request given the link the given request with handler method of controller classes. Controller class. So now here is dispatcher servlet take the support handler mapping component to map given request with handler. What is the dispatcher servlet take the support of which component? Handler mapping component. Okay. So now next is dispatcher servlet gives the request path and the request mode. Request path is nothing but a slash and any other thing, and request mode like get and post. Okay, mode na. Okay, mode to which component? Handler mapping component. Handler mapping component, and gets the which thing is get from the handler method. First required to request mapping information. It's getting the request mapping information object where it's like handler mapping component gets the request mapping information object. Okay, having what is that? Is having the controller class is having the wait, it's having the controller, it's having the controller class bean ID, it's having the controller class bean ID and handler method signature. These two things are the important. What is that? These two things are important. Handler method signature and having the controller class bean ID. Request mapping information contains these two things and give back to the dispatcher servlet. First one is the method signature and second one the class bean ID, controller bean class ID. Now next was so dispatcher servlet take the support of dispatcher servlet dispatcher servlet takes the support of view resolver component view view resolver component to map. What is that? To map given request to map given request related result to one view component and gets a view object and gets the view object. First I write it, then I will explain. First write it having 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 the physical view component name, having the view physical component and location and location. Like here you can take JSP as JSP's name, okay? JSP file. Here, so now write it. What is the point? This point is saying dispatcher servlet take the support of view resolver. View resolver, why it's taking the support? Because dispatcher servlet is responsibility to give the interact with the view resolver, and view resolver prepare the format of the result, then send back to the dispatcher servlet. That's why it takes support of the view resolver. Okay, view resolver component to map given a related result to one view component. It's map the given request related result to one component and gets back the object. Object is nothing but physical view component name and location. Name is nothing but suppose you give back to the handler method of view resolver giving to the name of the suppose location name is the web-inf like this, web-inf in the location, and physical view name is the name nothing but the file. Okay. Write it. Oh, will not issue. Write it. Yes, we can example also write it. Here we can use like free marker as the view component and as well as velocity component and what is that? JSP files. You see any more thing? Oh. Now this one is up to that. I hope. So now next I am going to draw the diagram. About the Spring Boot MVC flow. So you will get more clarity about this. Suppose this is the browser window. Here. This is our server part. This is guys our server part, guys. This is our server part. Okay, here you can write it server. This is our server part. Okay, now here you can write browser. This one is browser. Browser window. This is our browser window. Okay. Inside the server part, we have an application. An application having one part called dispatcher servlet. One part. This is the dispatcher servlet. Okay. This is the dispatcher servlet. Okay. Here we have one handler mapping. This is our dispatcher servlet part. I'm writing shortcut element. DS. Okay. DS having what is that? URL pattern. Na? DS having URL pattern. URL pattern is nothing but what's that? Slash. Okay, having slash, and this one is our handler mapping. Handler mapping. Handler mapping. Handler mapping. This one is our handler mapping. Okay. Handler mapping. And next one is this one is our handler classes. Handler classes, or otherwise you can say what is that? Handler classes, or otherwise controller. Handler classes. Handler or controller. Controller classes by using @controller annotation. With the @controller annotation. Controller annotation. It's having the @controller annotation. Okay. Color is good. No? Color is required. So now here write it handler or controller. Handler or controller. Controller controller. Controller annotations. Controller annotation. This controller class I have controller annotation. That's why this annotation gives the intimation to the tree container. This is the subnet container. This is the nothing but this is nothing but what is that? Controller class or handler class. The next one, the important part is guys our view part. View resolver component. Here we have view resolver component. Here we have this one is okay. Not red is not black. I want black. Okay. This one is view resolver. Why? Using this. This one is view resolver. Okay. This one is which? Which one? This part is view resolver, guys. So view resolver. Control A, red. View resolver. View resolver. This one is the view resolver. Okay. Here one object is there and we created after that object. So now this is our total component in the Spring Boot MVC. Spring Boot MVC. Now first this is the server side. Deploy the application, all these things. Okay. Deploy all these things. So now first while I'm writing, first I will map that. First point is I'm explaining this point. Explain this point. I'm explaining diagram. First point is what is the first point? Programmer deploy Spring Boot MVC application app in web server or app server, application server. Okay, application server. Now we suppose we deploy the one application. Now second point is after the deploying the application, deployment activities take place as the discussion in the previous session. Like as the previous session we discussed IOC container creation, dispatches servlet registration with the servlet container. Are you getting my point? In last class, we have discussed. In last class, we have discussed these topics. Last class, we have discussed which one? Which one here? After the deployment, after the deployment, IOC container. IOC container creation, dispatcher servlet registration, DS registration with servlet, with servlet container. Now next is pre-instantiation at the time of deployment. These many activities is true. Okay. Pre-instantiation of singleton scope. Pre-instantiation of singleton scope. Don't think this one is the single object. Okay, this is a singleton scope. Okay. So now here, singleton scope is spring beans. Singleton scope of spring beans like controller classes, handler classes, handler mapping, and view resolver, and service classes. If any service classes are there, like VO and etc., etc. In this process, the necessary dependency injection also takes place. The necessary dependency injection also take place. That's it. So now this is the second. At the time of deployment, these many steps work at the time of deployment. At the time of deployment, any application to deploy these many steps. So that's why it's creating one dispatcher select handler classes and view resolver. Now second is the third is very important. Third one, this one. Third one is give the request to dispatcher servlet. Give the request to dispatcher servlet. Request dispatcher servlet. This to deploy web application. This one is the third steps. Then third steps. This is the third request. Give the request to which where? Give the request to now it's good. Give the request to deployed web application. Inside the deployed web application, what is that? Dispatcher servlets are there. So now I'm writing this point. The third point is browser gives request to the deployed spring boot MVC application. Now after that, dispatcher servlet traps. Dispatcher servlet traps the request. After that, dispatcher servlet traps the request like fourth. Here you can write fourth. Dispatcher servlet traps the request and apply some common services. Common system services. In our previous sessions, we discussed these things. Apply some common services. Common services. After the applying common services like system and auditing, tracking, logging, all these things. Like now, the fourth is parallelly I am writing. Fourth is what is the fourth one is the dispatchers are led. The dispatchers are led. DS traps the request and applies and apply the common system services on the request like logging, tracking, security, all these things. Login, tracking, security, and auditing. Auditing is the one thing. Auditing. That. Now this is the fourth steps, guys. Now after the fourth steps, guys. After the fourth step, fifth step is dispatcher servlet. Dispatcher servlet give the request URL. This one give the request URL and request URL and guys request URL and request mode to where handler mapping component. Okay. Okay. What is the steps number 5? Yeah, you're gonna add 5. After the this one handler mapping return after taking that and processing all these things and return back to which one object it will return. What is the object? Request mapping information object. It is return. What is that? It is return. This is also it is return. It is return. What is that? It is return request. It is return request. It is return request mapping info object. It is return info object. This one. And here this one gave the request. So I want to write it 5th point. Now first give the request is which okay. Request URL and request mode also. So fifth step says what is it? Write it. Dispatcher servlet hand over the request to handler mapping. Handler mapping component to map given incoming to map given incoming request with handler method with handler method of handler class. Handler method of handler classes. Handler classes of you can say controller classes. Controller classes. Controller classes. Controller classes and gets whatever which one we will get, which one we will get request mapping info object, request mapping info object we will get request mapping info object, request mapping info object we will get. Okay, request mapping info object we will get. We will get from which component we will get this object handler mapping. Handler mapping component. Handler mapping component having controller class ID, controller class ID, and ID is nothing but a bean ID. Na? Bean ID and guys what that and method signature handler method signature that's it. So now this is our fifth point, guys. Dispatchers are list hand over the request to handler mapping. Hand over to the handler mapping component to map the given incoming request with handler method. Map to the incoming request which one handler method and controller classes. And after that mapping, this return or gets, we will get dispatcher servlet gets one object request mapping info object. Then request mapping info object having what mean ID and request ID, mean ID and method signature MS. Method signature. So I'm changing the color. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Come back. Yes. Here we will get one thing here. Bean ID and method signature handle mapping return back to the dispatcher servlet. Now next is here in the sixth point. Here is the sixth point. See, sixth point is dispatcher servlet. Here 6 point is dispatcher servlet takes the controller class. Take the controller class. Which one? Bean ID and take the bean ID from the received request mapping info object. Okay, info object and get the controller class object. Gets the controller class object here. Get the controller class object from dispatcher servlet. Create IOC container. Whatever thing IOC container. Dispatcher servlet prepare the necessary object. Dispatcher servlet prepares the necessary object based on the signature of another method. This is the sixth process is this will create the IOC container and dispatcher servlet prepares the necessary object based on the signature of another method. Okay, collected from the request mapping info object. We are collecting request mapping info. So now 6 point is the processing point, guys. 6 point is dispatcher select take. So dispatcher select take controller class bean ID from the received request mapping info. Request mapping info object. Request mapping info object. Request mapping info object. Okay. Request mapping info object. Get from the receive from the request mapping info object and gets controller gets the controller class object. Get the controller class object from which one? Dispatcher servlet. Get the controller class object from dispatcher servlet. From which dispatcher servlet create IOC container. Create the IOC container. Create IOC container. Container DS also prepare the necessary object based signature of handler method collected from request mapping info object. 6 points is a very important point, guys. Entire the flow, this one is the important thing. Now one time I'm explaining this point. Here 6 point is saying. Here the 6 points in dispatcher select take the controller class bean ID. Dispatcher select take the controller class bean ID from the request mapping info object. Where request mapping info object and get the controller class object. From dispatcher servlet. Get the controller class object from the dispatcher servlet. Okay. So now next create the IOC container. Created the IOC container. Dispatcher servlet. From dispatcher servlet create the IOC container. Dispatcher servlet also prepare the now it's not dispatcher servlet responsibility to prepare the necessary object and signature of handler method. Okay. Collect from the request mapping. That's it. Now seventh step says, guys, call the handler. Okay. Seventh step is, guys. Seventh step is. What is the seventh step? Can I write it first? So seventh step, dispatcher servlet here. Observe here, comment. Dispatcher servlet 7 steps. 7 steps. Dispatcher servlet calls the handler method. Handler method having necessary object as the argument on the above received controller class. Above received controller class, which is received, then on the basis of these objects, call the handler class methods. So now, right here, you can understand. So now here, what is that? Dispatchers are let call, dispatchers are let calls handler method having necessary object as the argument on the above received controller class of the above received controller class. Okay. Next point. After this, this method next is this one intact with the here request mapping is there. So now 7th point is the 7th and 8th point is here processing all the requests here, processing the request. Now 8th is 8th one. Okay, what is the 8th point is? What is the 8th point, guys? Write it. Now I'm writing here 8th point. This point is handler method of controller class, either directly process the request, or takes the support of what is the services classes, take the support of services classes to process the request, and keeps the result in the scope. Oh, in the scope like request scope. In the request scope. Now 8th number is doing. 8th number is okay. 8th number is here. Here is methods are there. And service logics here are there. Service logic and DO logic and many more things about business logic also. Here you can delegate the request to the services classes or DO classes. Here you can delegate. If you want, you can process it. Up to that first example on CRUD, I will show you on the same request. And same when I will use layered application, there I will delegate the request to the service class. And okay, business logic. Otherwise, you can write business logic. Now, 9th number is then this one which one? Through the here. Ninth number is the steps. Ninth number is the steps. Ninth number is the data logical view name. Logical view name. LVM. Logical view name. This after processing all this thing, it return logical view name to the dispatcher select. So now ninth number steps. Ninth number steps is that what is the ninth number? The handler method of controller, the handler method of controller class return logical view name, return logical view name like LVN to which to where to dispatcher server to where dispatcher server of back. The handler method of controller of logical view name to dispatcher server. Now this is the steps is completed. Ninth number of steps is complete. Now after this, it will go into the 10th number steps to it will go to view resolver component, view resolver component, view resolver component, view resolver component. This is one is 10th number of steps. This is the 10th number of steps, guys. So 10th number is the dispatcher servlet given logical view name, view resolver component. The dispatcher servlet, simple. The dispatcher servlet gives the logical view name to the view resolver. Okay, view resolver. And after, so I'm writing. Now 10th number of steps is dispatcher servlet gives logical view name to gives view resolver to view resolver component. That's it. 11th number of steps is there. 11th number of steps. What is the 11th number of steps, guys? To back the view resolver, to back the view resolver. Here the point is view resolver maps or link logical view name to physical component and return view object. Return view object having physical view name and location. So the point is view resolver maps the view resolver maps or link the logical view name to physical view component. 11th steps, na? Okay. View object. Now next is 12th number of steps is there, guys. 12th number of steps. The very, very important steps is dispatcher servlet gets the physical view name and location from the received view object. Here is create one view object. This is nothing but view object. That is, what is that? View physical view component. It's not physical view component. physical view component. Physical view component. This is the physical view component, and after this, 12th step is interact with this. Okay. Now, interact with the physical view component, then physical view component back to the dispatcher servlet, return back to the dispatcher servlet. Okay. So now what here is 12th number of steps. 12th number of steps. I don't know what is the 12th number of steps, guys. Observe. 12th number of steps here. So now dispatcher servlet DS, dispatcher servlet DS gets physical view name and location, physical view name location from which from the received view object, from the received view object, and sends the controller to physical view component using RD, using which one? RD dot forward method to format the result. Format the result and gathered from request scope. Gathered from request scope. Gathered from request scope using presentation logic. These formatted using goes back to the. So now these formatted result goes back to dispatcher subject. Goes back to dispatchers. This formatted result. This is the total 12th number of steps. Now, last step says dispatcher servlets sends the result as a response to the browser. So now this is the 13 number of response and the response. Dispatcher servlet sends formatted result back to browser as response. So now this is the total flow. This is the 30 number of steps and this is the total flow of the Spring Boot. Now, one more time I am revising. Now, first one thing is to deploy your Spring Boot MVC inside the server space, and as a result, after the deploy, we will have to create some necessary objects. Then, after creating all these objects like handler and the class and view resolver, all this after the creation, the browser request to deploy the dispatcher server and dispatcher server. So dispatcher server may grab the apply someone and create one because hand over the request to the handler method, and handler method return back to the request mapping object. Return back after processing all the things and the dispatch handler method return back to the one object called request mapping object. And request mapping object having two things. Like first one is the controller bean ID name and controller bean ID name MS. MS is nothing but method signature and handler method. And next one in dispatcher servlet sends the request to the handler method with the appropriate VIN or method signature. And eighth number of steps. This one process the request, and if here is any service logics are there, it will execute. If we inside the controller or handler method, any business logic is there, it will execute it. If here is service classes are there, any other classes like DO access classes are there, then this controller we are delegating the request to the service. Okay, here is not there any delegation. So after that, after the processing all this thing, it will return the logical view name to the dispatcher alert, and dispatcher alert take the logical view name. On the basis of the logical view name, this will send to the request to the view resolver, and then view resolver prepare the then 10th number of steps here. View resolver give the logical view name to the view resolver component. Now 11 number of view resolver the logical view name to the physical component, the view object in the physical view name manipulation. Physical view name request to web-i dot like file name this.csp. It will give this physical to name to the dispatcher servlet, and dispatcher servlet interact with 12 steps interact with the physical view annotation from the received view object and send the control to physical view components by using which rd.forward and format the result and gather the result and the which scope, request scope, and send back to the dispatcher servlet. Dispatcher servlet return back to the as the response, send back to the as the response to browser. So now this is the total flow of Spring MVC. So I hope you got some clear. I hope you understood some points. I have still doubt. Just use my Facebook group. This is my Facebook group. Yeah, not a Facebook group, it is a Facebook where I will upload all this thing on Facebook. If you want to upload, just join our Telegram channel. So thank you very much. So next week is practical. We are going to discuss practical how to create a Spring Boot MVC first application level. Discuss tomorrow. Okay, tomorrow session. We will meet. Thank you for watching. We will meet next.